Is that the one that was with you Sunday?
No.
All right.
That's Jasmine. She just got baptized.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right, we are good to go. We are live.
Wow.
Yeah, we played a We Just Dance my Christmas. It was great, you know. It's
Nice.
always a village, so
That sounds, it is. Always.
yeah.
Okay, so we should be good to go.
Are we live right now?
We are live right
Yeah.
now.
Ooh.
How does it feel to be live?
Less dramatic than I thought. I thought we'd be like hearing ourselves with a microphone.
No, I can leave it on, but
No.
I turned it off because it's going straight into the phone now. So
Okay.
yeah,
Sounds good.
so we're good.
All right.
Welcome,
Thank you.
welcome. Hello there, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us and watching. This is Dynamic Discipleship, soon to be Daily Bread.
Yeah.
We're changing up our title.
We're going through a rebranding right
That's
now.
not already
Well,
trademarked. I thought there was a little.
we're kind of like playing with it a little bit, but we
Yeah.
haven't like posted it. So
Yeah.
if somebody types in Daily Bread, we won't come up.
Right.
Not yet.
Or
But
you
we
could
will.
do some alteration like Daily Bread, BRED, like bread
Exactly.
I see
from
what you did there.
the spirit.
Exactly.
If you get into litigation
Yeah, you know,
territory.
yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Well, Sarah, welcome and thank you for being here with
Thank
us. Sarah is one of the members of our church, and tell us a little bit about yourself, real quick.
Well, my name is Sarah. As of last week, I'm 33 years old.
Wow. Happy belated birthday again.
Thank you. Welcome any donations.
And gifts.
Facebook.
I lived in the Triangle area since I was 5 years old,
Wow.
and I love it. I am not a homebody, but this is just a cool area. So I grew up here with my whole family in the church at one point, and then life happens. Family sort of imploded around age 13 for me, so it's been a real blessing to be able to have the same church family, even as my family dynamic changed, and a real testament that even if you give your life to God, you'll be redeciding that commitment as your life changes. So it's been really interesting. I was baptized at end of 8th grade.
Wow.
And
Nice.
I feel really grateful for the journey God gave me and the way that He even protected me through that. So it's been interesting. It's been awesome and unique, I think. And I'm grateful because I feel like He keeps redefining my life at each stage. So
Very nice.
I'm enjoying
Awesome.
this post-college, real adult life.
Yeah, the real world.
Like
Adulting.
post the initial adulting phase, I think I've got that under my belt.
Okay.
I bought a townhouse a few years ago. Like I feel like this is a new level of adulting.
So now you're a real adult.
Real
I'm really
adulting.
loving it.
There's
Like,
pre-adulting, now you're a real adulting.
yeah,
I like
it's
that.
so much more
Nice.
relaxed. I'm
Awesome.
enjoying it. So
Very cool. Very
Awesome.
cool.
Cool.
Well, I have a random first memory of you
ooh,
as a camping trip with you and your brother Jimmy.
wow.
From like, I don't even know, I think I was like 5 or
Oh,
something.
gosh.
That's
Wow.
like the
Yeah.
earliest I remember, and I don't even know like where/how I met you. I just
Right.
remember I went on a camping trip one time and you and your brother Jimmy were there.
That's believable.
Yeah.
Great memory.
Hard to know if you were being kidnapped or if that was
I don't really
a church
know,
function.
just, you know,
Yeah, I don't know if I can remember a distinct first memory of you, but I will never forget your father and the
There you go,
Christmas
the Christmas
story.
show,
And
Alfonso.
so,
Nice.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, lots of good memories.
There we go. There we go. Well, we're gonna go ahead and kick things off. The revealing of your favorite character, please.
Abraham!
Nice.
Abraham. All
Nice
right.
Okay, Abram.
There we go. Or yes, Abram. So tell us a little bit about Abraham, why he's your favorite character,
Yeah.
and I guess kind of how you can relate to him.
Yeah, so besides for the fantastic song he has,
Okay.
I know,
Father Abraham.
yeah, I'm a fan of anybody with their own song. And he's the father of faith, but I feel like I've been learning more lately specifically about Old Testament characters, and I find him so amazing because his faith was unreal, you know, and yet it also, there's a lot of like exposures of his character when he went in ways that was flawed, and so I just appreciate like that he had both so strongly. Like, so I guess for the background, you know, in Eastern culture particularly, you stay with your family, you learn your trade from your father, that's like how you survive, and so the fact that the first thing
just add on to their house and you and your wife live there,
you stay there. So it was such a big deal that when God asks him to leave, that he agreed, you know, and that he was willing to trust that. And I think I was learning even recently that in his character, that it's thought likely that his brother had passed away. It kind of mentions early on that his brother had died, and then he might have even taken his barren wife like from his brother. So just that he was selfless to begin with, and even doing that act and thinking about others like to begin with, and took his nephew Lot with him, and so I think it's amazing that God gave him this promise, and he generally believed it, but then he went to Egypt when there was a famine, which seemed like things might go downhill, and they sort of did a little bit. He was planning on kind of bartering his wife's beauty for wealth and assurances during the famine, which he sort of got, but it kind of got in trouble because Pharaoh kidnapped her. So then it was that was an example of a time that he kind of took things into his own hands, and it didn't work out, but God still brought him out. And I don't know, just I see that reoccurring of even when he was negotiating to get Lot back, but then chose to not try to give the king of Sodom any reason to credit Abraham for his wealth, so he kind of gave everything back, including Lot, which would have been his only hope for having lineage at that point. And then I don't know if this is too much intro.
No, you're good.
And then learning about you know, he wanted to know more about how God was going to bless this line of people through him, and I think as he pushed for more answers, God was like, okay, fine, here's, you know, it will be your own blood, but then that idea of like, sometimes God doesn't tell us too much about our story, because if we do know, we could mess it up, because with that piece of information, not knowing the whole perspective,
now you're getting to the whole time travel debacle. Like you can't know your story, because if you know your story, then you change your story.
Yes,
and then,
it is an enigma. But the idea that if you do know, it's problematic because you might screw it up. You know, if I knew what God wanted to do in my life exactly, I might try to see something and be like, oh, this is it, and angle it, and it not work out well, which is what happened when he slept with Hagar, the maidservant. So it's just kind of like, I just appreciate that I can relate to that idea of somebody who's trying to trust, but also has moments of impatience and taking things into their own hands. And then of course I think Abram's most well known for, after God does give him a child, which that whole story is cool because he's like super hospitable, and I've been learning more about how the Eastern culture is like, that's such a high value of hospitality, which I love, but I don't know that I would ever be like to the extreme that Abraham was, to just have like random strangers and like
you're
drop
gonna have
everything.
a son.
Well, and drop everything to serve him before they said that, you know. But then to take that news and then to sacrifice that, but still be with Isaac as he was as they were going up the mountain. When he asked him like, what are we doing? He's like I'm here for you. Like, it'll be okay, and not you know, avoiding the topic. So there's many reasons why I like Abraham. Nice. Also, he married Sarah, so
well, there you go.
Pretty cool. Damn good taste.
She finally answered the question. That was a super detailed answer. I can definitely tell that like he is truly someone that inspires you a lot, for you to list all those things. I mean, it's not just a generic, I like this character because of one reason. You pretty much told like most of his life story and most of his significant moments, you know.
Right. Well,
that's cool.
When you first were asking, I wasn't sure that I had like one succinct, and I almost said Rahab, and I was like, oh great, they're gonna ask me like how I relate to Rahab. I'm such a realist. Oh my God. I do think she's inspiring just because she had faith in a culture that was not a culture of faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I've been learning more about. I've been listening to this. If I can promote other podcasts. This podcast called Bema, BEMA, which has like been so amazing to learn about not only Jewish literature styles, but also some of the lessons to gather out of the Old Testament, and I think it has more stuff too. But so that's inspired. I think partially because I've like just listened to that, but I'm like, oh yeah, Abraham, that's a good one. Nice. But he is very much so the initiator of faith. So as such, kind of is a great person to look to for what does it look like to have faith, and to be able to learn from mistakes and trust the story and whatever.
you kind of went through like I've got to skim through my notes here because like, you went through
No
like
more
all my
questions now.
points. I'm like, God,
You're gonna ask
everything.
me.
You don't have any questions to ask him.
But no, like I a couple of points to things that you said there. The first was that he left his family.
Yeah.
And culturally, I'm glad that you talked about that because that was one of the things that I wanted to point out was that it's not Americanized, and we so much want to Americanize it. Like, oh, okay, you're 18, go leave your house, and it's like, no, like your business, your wealth, your like everything you do comes from your parents and your grandparents, and they all live in the same neighborhood, in the same house, in the same compound. Like,
and one thing I was learning too is that you're also intended to carry the banner of your father in terms of their beliefs as well. So I think there's a story where he like chopped up all the idols in his father's house and left the axe in one of the hands of the remaining idol, and his father's like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, that idol did it. And his father's like, no, they don't do that, they're just, I made them. And he's like, then why do you worship them? So the idea too of like even if your family, whatever they believe, like you're responsible for standing for truth distinctly, and that's inspiring.
Absolutely. Wow. All right. So,
woo! Y'all gotta listen to this other podcast. It's real good.
We're gonna have to put a plug for that in there.
Yeah.
And like, I'm gonna have to.
I've heard of Braman. I have, so I might actually check that out.
It's real good.
Oh man. Okay. So, I guess breaking down what you said a little bit. I kind of one of the things that I do before we go over any of these characters is I just go through and I read the story. And I'm just like, let me just refresh myself. Let me just read the story. And then obviously there's so many great,
there's a lot there.
It's a couple chapters. And so the first thing was when he left, he was 75. Like, it's not like you or me, like, leaving. It's like, no, you're established. Like, you're, like, I'm assuming your parents are already dead. Like, if you're 70, well, although I don't know, because in Bible times people live to like 140
they lived a long time back then.
This is plastic.
I just thought it was cool. And then the other thing that you kind of touched on was that it did say his brother had died, and so he took his wife and he took his nephew Lot. And then as I was reading that, it just kind of reminded me. I don't know if I forgot or if I just never really recognized it, but like that's Lot from Lot's story. Like I never really like put it together of like, oh, that's the same Lot that was with Abraham when he left and went.
And just the idea that he like they got to a point where their herdsmen were fighting, so they parted ways. And again, if he was bringing Lot with him to kind of carry on this lineage, this like legacy of his name, that he even let him separate was like distinct, or like a distinct move of faith. And then I think like that he even gave him back after he rescues him, because he rescues him, but then the next time we see him, he's back in Sodom too. So something I was talking about, like Lot being an assimilator, because he kind of assimilated with the Sodomites and whatever, but Abraham is more of an engager. Anyway, they're very distinct people, but it's an interesting relationship that he has with Lot, that he like loves him and takes care of him, but also is willing to trust and not put all of his hedge his bets all on Lot.
All on Lot. Well, I'm going to throw a random question in there.
Okay.
We usually try to save our questions towards the end, but you're so packed full of information that I'm going to throw them in the middle.
Okay.
All right. So
I
this
is
is
half a coffee today too.
only half.
Wow.
Ooh, see, that caffeinates you up a little bit. So this is a little bit on the lighter side here. If God told you to leave to go to a land right now, who would you want to take with you?
Oh, like a real person that I know?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Abram took his wife and his nephew.
This is for you, and I know visas are a challenge, but in this hypothetical, you're coming with me.
Wow. There you go. There you go. I like it. Very nice, very nice.
And my gran, probably too.
Nice.
grandma.
You know, Abram got 2 people, so we'll give you 2.
Yeah, we'll give you a bonus.
Well, plus he had, you know, a whole bunch of servants he brought with him too.
Yeah, so you can come too, Devon.
I don't work for free. I say that.
Oh goodness. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to jump through his stories a little bit here. Or I guess stories / promises that God did. So when they left, God told him he was going to give him a land, give him a place that, you know, he would be able to prosper and it would be his own. And almost, I don't know, I don't know quite the words to say here, but I found it interesting that you have the story where he destroys all the idols, but then not necessarily an idol, but he builds 2 memorials when he gets there. It talks about the 2 altars to the Lord, and that was something I think kind of in his heritage, in his, like, this is our place and passing it down, like that was their memory stone. That was their way of like, hey, this is our start, and now I'm going to teach you, and you're going to teach yours, and you're going to teach yours.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, I found that interesting, that he was able to build that and separate the 2. Like,
yeah. Well, I think what's really interesting about that too is that he made that the permanent structure, but he pitched a tent for himself.
Yes.
And this whole story, his story comes after the Tower of Babel, where they were building, not that building's wrong, but they were building for their own glory's sake.
Correct.
So I remember learning like that being a distinct kind of feature, that he was willing to, let God's glory be more prominent than his own.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh,
that's a great point. You know, it makes you wonder, like, how in my life am I seeking my own comfort and my own, I guess, goals, other than what God wants, you know?
Right.
And for Abraham to do that, you know, even I think about David as well with the temple as well, and just people that were so fired up about building something for God, you know, it's like God's house before my house, you know? Like that says a lot about how it's kind of like the sermon on Sunday where Clayton mentioned that pretty much what you believe is proven by what you do.
Yes.
Not by what you say.
Yes.
So these men were showing that by what they did, that they value God over themselves.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime that we're like prioritizing our own comforts or needs over whether it's like sleep, I feel like that can be the time where I can create enough time and space for me to do the things that I like to do. But if I'm not creating that space to just like praise God like every day, then I'm not really, you know, that's more my own Tower of Babel rather than creating an altar. So.
One of the things you kind of referred to a little bit ago, also in the story of the strangers and in the amount of hospitality that he showed, in that story, one of the things that I kind of find amazing, or that I like to look at, is that at that point when God does allow Abram to have a child, it's like he was 75 when he left, and he was told that this was going to happen, and like he waited till he was 99, like to an impossible point almost. Like, all right, this is not realistic. I'm not gonna have a kid. I'm 99 years old. Like, my wife is like not able to have kids. And I really feel like the time was on purpose. Like, I mean, well, obviously God does everything in his own timing, but it's like, I still have stuff to teach you. I still, like, I want you to be patient. I want to teach you about like everything that he's doing. And then the part that I relate to, and we kind of talked about, I think last week when we were talking about Gideon, but like he questions God, and he's and God is like, no, here's the proof, and you know, he's like, the stars in the sky, and like at multiple points in times he questions God, and he even makes mistakes, and God is still willing to use him, right? And so I always think it's cool when I see that in characters, because it gives me hope. It's like, okay, I've questioned, and God answers me, and I've made mistakes along the way, but like all these great things came out of Abraham, even after he made so many mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like I can still be used.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think is really cool.
Yeah.
In the story, that's how I relate to the story.
Yeah. No, I think that's ultimately like the hope that Abraham has is that you can still be a faith rock star even if you have moments of doubt or impatience. That God's maybe his anger might go down a few generations, but his love to like 1,000 generations. And about the timing, I don't know. I mean, it's like hard to convert like Old Testament years. It's like converting dog years. Like, I don't know what was that really like. But regardless, clearly
was a
he
year
thought
a month?
Yeah.
So I can
Old
handle
Testament
that.
years is like equivalent to 3, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But obviously he was old enough that it seemed improbable, and of course Sarai being barren is like extra improbable.
Yeah.
And I love that she laughed because not that was because Abraham laughed too, but I guess he laughed differently, so it didn't matter that he was
He
crying
chuckled.
like.
He chuckled.
He was like, she was just like,
He was crying,
Like,
laughing.
but yeah, I mean, I think it caused him to have to trust more, and I think God was probably the same way that even like the 40 years in the desert with the Israelites, he was testing their hearts, like trying to spending that time trying to get like Egypt out of them, sort of. I feel like I think God probably did that timing intentionally in order to really like refine Abraham to be a model of what it's like to have faith in God. Because if you have faith just when it's convenient or easy or obvious, he wouldn't really be then the father of faith. He was given all these times to really show by his actions that he would follow through, even if like it didn't make sense. And I just find it's like so easy to lose faith. Like personally, it's like so easy for me to just take things into my own power or control, or and I'm used to it too. Even having a good church family or good mentors, I can still I with my kind of nuclear family not being as normal, whatever that means.
Whatever that is.
I know. But you can, especially as an adult now, you can really get into managing and handling and meeting your own expectations, and the idea that God would call you to have to vulnerably trust, and it's hard. And I love that, I wouldn't necessarily want to be Abraham, but I love that he's an example of like enduring that period of unknown for a really long time.
Yeah. Very true. Devontae, you want to pop out one of your questions?
Yeah. So I did have an observation first.
Ooh, I like it.
So when we were talking earlier, we were talking about Abraham leaving, going to the land, and it made me think about Hebrews 11, because Hebrews 11 is like the hall of faith. If you're mentioned in this chapter, like you did something right, very clearly. You definitely want to be like listed in this chapter, like if you're someone in the Bible, because the whole chapter is just about incredible feats of faith, And Abraham's, what was listed for him was actually, it wasn't actually Isaac or his near sacrifice of Isaac. It was actually him. It says Hebrews 11:8, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive his inheritance, obeyed and went. So that was listed as his, like, I guess his highlight of faith. Like if this is like taken as like your biggest highlight, of the way that you show faith in your time, that was his. It wasn't necessarily Isaac, which I thought was really interesting, because I would have thought that doing something like that would have required more faith than basically going to another land. Like sacrificing your son took a lot of faith. So, and that's kind of a segue into what my question is. Sarah, you knew that this was going to be coming, but Genesis 22, we have to talk about this chapter. This is where it says in my Bible, Abraham tested, which is a great way to describe this chapter, because he was tested. His faith was tested. So we're familiar with the story of Abraham and God telling him to sacrifice Isaac, his son. And of course, he's preparing to do it. He has Isaac tied down on the altar and everything. But right before he puts down the blade, God says, wait, there's a ram in the bush. So my question to you, Sarah, is what is your Isaac? What is that one thing where it's like, if God were to tell you to give that up, it requires so much faith, and you would really have to struggle with it before you were prepared to do it?
Ooh.
I mean, I think the Isaacs that I like currently have that like I think would be a struggle would be like job and like financial security.
Yeah.
I love my job. I feel really grateful for that, and I love being able to own a home, and I think I take like maybe more pride and security in those two things than God might want me to. But I think as far as the Isaacs that we don't have or whatever, like the lineage that's coming, I think when Guy Hammond came and shared about how he just had to give up his own personal hope of romantic satisfaction essentially by being a same-sex attracted man, that he just like chose to give that up for God. I was like, oh, that's a lot of sacrifice. And I mean, being single still,
just throwing it out.
I think that, like, the idea that if God, like, asked me to just be like, I'm gonna need you to just be surrendered with, like, that not being, that dream not being a reality, I would be like, and that would be hard, but, like, he obviously deserves literally all of everything beyond my life, it's just, so I feel like that's probably an area that God would like to, probably like to have my heart adjust some, but I feel like also that's part of the area that I want to grow in, learning to trust the story too, and trust that it's not the same way that Abraham kind of took into his own control, negotiating Sarah's beauty to get wealth, that was a bad move on his part. Like, I also want to learn not just giving up on my dreams, but learning to surrender them to God and trust that God can like make improbable happen.
Amen. Financial security is definitely a big Isaac, I think, for a lot of people, especially in this country. It's a very capitalistic, kind of society where we basically emphasize like being able to have financial freedom and being able to have an excess of abundance financially, especially as well. So that's a big thing. I think that would be a big thing for me also, just the knowing that every 2 weeks I'm going to have a paycheck, and having that stability, and just knowing that, because honestly, me working doesn't really require any faith. I know that it's going to get there, hopefully, in my bank account every 2 weeks, and it's just, that's not even something that requires faith. It's like, okay, I know it's coming, and I feel like it's going to be there, and what if we lived in a situation where it's like, because some people do live like this, where they don't know where their next, financial resources are going to come from, and that could be really challenging to think about sometimes. It's like, if I was in that situation, would I be in a situation where I trusted God? Because I think that's what got Abraham, I don't know what he was thinking in his mind at that time, but I think one thing that got Abraham through this test is the fact that if I give up my son, God is not going to leave me like in this barren state. He's not going to just say, give up your son and then not have something better for me, like somehow, some way, this is going to be a worthwhile sacrifice. And I think that's one thing that's encouraging about God, is that he doesn't want us to like lose what's valuable to us. He wants to give us things that's even more valuable than what we think is valuable in our lives. And in this situation,
you're not dreaming big enough.
Exactly. In this situation, he had the ram there already in the bush, and he got to keep his son, so God wants to provide for us. He wants to reward our faith in a way. I think that's encouraging, that our faith in God, we can look forward to it being rewarded in some way as well. I think that's really encouraging to know.
I remember thinking about the Lord's Prayer of like, give us this day our daily bread, which can kind of be like, okay, if you want me to say that, I'll say it, but I don't understand why I need to, because I'm buying my bread, so I got it. That idea of like living as if, having the desperation for God's provision as if you really didn't know if you'd get it that day or not. And that's harder to kind of mentally accumulate. And all this goes without saying, health and things that you can't control and I take for granted. Although I've seen some people with amazing faith in their health crises, and that does not to make life that it would be easy, but I think there's something about, I think, the financial aspect that you would feel like you ought to be able to control it, so it'd be easier. And both, in either situation, it's very easy to blame. That's like a really easy thing for me to do, is blame shift. But I don't know which would be worse or which one I'm hedging more of my bets on inadvertently. But I don't know. I've seen people with really chronic health things just kind of surrender because there's literally no other choice. And I've seen their faith grow. But it's hard to imagine being really faithful and really destitute at the same time.
I think that's what I get out of when it talks about it's harder for a rich man than get a camel through the eye of a needle. Like I do a lot of charity stuff over with Ron McDonald House and some leukemia, lymphoma, stuff like that. And those are some of the most like grateful and surrendered and like present. The people, the people who have the least are the people who are just like super aware and super just like, I'm in the moment, I'm not taking anything for granted, like I'm grateful for everything that happens. And I think it's, I don't know, I hate it, but I'm one of those weird people that like the worse I'm doing in life, the more faith I have. Like when I'm cool, when I'm good, I'm like, oh, okay, I got this. And then like when everything falls apart, I'm like, God help me, I need you, I need you. And so like I keep going like through these like cycles because God's like, no, you need me. But like I just think that's the way it is. It's like, I think just as humans, we get cocky. We're just like, oh, look at what, you know, I don't relate so much with the financial security one. I owned my own company for a long time, so like.
Are you an engineer too?
Yeah, you know, you guys are engineers. You stable people. I kind of have. I kind of have a background of just sort of like, you know, starting off as a DJ. It was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this party and they're gonna pay me, and if I don't book any parties, I don't have any money. And so I'm very grateful to now be at a stable point. It's a lot less stressful than it was before. But I think just in general, we all kind of have that where, you know, once we get comfortable, we're comfortable. We're just like, oh, I don't need help. I don't need God. I'm not necessarily, like, I'm thankful, but I'm not, like, grateful, you know, because of stuff. But, like, no, like, we do need to be grateful for that. We do need to have faith. Like, it is God providing it for us. It is, you know, if God says, like, move right now, leave all your stuff and go, like, how many of us would be able to do that?
Yeah, and I think we can get content as well in, like, what might be a relatively small life, and it might not seem small in the sense that we have the luxuries we want and have arrived, but, like, are we living, like, a big faith kind of life? Like, am I getting to experience big faith, or is it all just kind of safe? And so someone was challenged me recently, or it came to kind of the idea of praying, and I think sometimes I can not even pray for things because I'm so accustomed to, you know, working on managing whatever I want. You know, it's something in my control. And so the idea of, like, just praying to God with the humility of, like, I don't deserve any of this. I don't and an idea of, like, deserving love. Like, who would ever say I deserve love, even from a human being? You don't ever deserve it. Like, that's the most distinctly clear gift of the thing. And so this idea of, like, being able to remember in prayer, like, no, I don't deserve your love, but I ask for, you know, on behalf of your love, I ask for whatever, and trusting that, you know, relationally as a father who loves to give good gifts, that he would hear that. And so I don't know, I feel like I'm recently challenged in my my prayer, and am I really praying out of humility and vulnerability, or as opposed to just kind of not praying about something not surrendered, because it's really more a function of what I manage and do on my own power. So
Cool.
Good sidetracks.
Do you have any more serious questions before we get into the crazy questions?
I have some more serious points.
Oh, you have another serious one? Okay. Is this a, like, we're going to need to have you back and do a part 2 serious
This
points?
is the Sarah show.
I feel like I might...
This is the Sarah show. She's taking this
I,
over.
like, regurgitate all the things that I've just learned, and seriously check out this podcast.
All right. Well, give us one more.
So when there's a point where God asked Abram to make to kind of dedicate their covenant, and he had him bring a couple of different animals, and he split them in half, and like, apparently that was a typical covenant method for engagement, but that the fathers would do for kind of a bridal covenant, and it would essentially mean that, you know, as the father of the bride, they each, like, step in the blood, like, they put them halves, like, facing each other to kind of make a corridor of blood. It was called a blood path covenant, and it was essentially saying that I promise to, you know, for the father of the groom to, like, pay this dowry, and if I don't, you can step in my own blood the way we're doing this. And the father would be promising, father of the bride would be promising a virgin bride, and if he didn't come through on his promise, that he could do that in his own blood. And so it's this, like, super deep commitment of a covenant, and this is right after I think Abram asks God for like another sign, and you know, and he's getting a little antsy and frustrated, and God's like, okay, well, you know, like go get these things, let's make this covenant, and Abram did it, but being that Abram was like the lesser party in that situation, like the father of the groom, like he should have been the first one to walk through, but I don't know if you call it, like it says like animals of prey came or birds of prey came, so clearly it would have been like sitting for a little while, because I think Abraham realized that taking that type of like commitment level, like that we're like not really able to do, to be able to say like you could do this in my blood, that's how strong my commitment to you will be, like that's a gutsy, that's a ballsy move to do that. So he kind of sat there kind of like in a conundrum, like in a pickle that he had made.
Am I gonna do this?
Yeah, and then that God ended up going, I think it was like a spirit of like fire and smoke or something, like a cloud, whatever, that came through. That was two of those to express that God was like kind of taking on that covenant on both angles, like that God knew we couldn't make that covenant commitment, but kind of made it for us. So, and that's just started this whole image of like what this kind of like bridal type of relationship that God is making with Israelites, with his people, and I just think that's like really been interesting and really neat to learn. So that was like a random thing that I had no idea about until recently.
Yeah, I just learned something new too.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I like that.
Yeah, and they're also comparing like Hagar and Ishmael in a way, because they put that story in a weird place where it would seem like Ishmael is a 13-year-old kid like under a bush, but that doesn't make sense. So they actually probably moved it to kind of parallel that when Abraham was taking Isaac up to the mountain, like even then kind of the center of that story was about Abraham still being with his son and kind of being willing to stay with him and be with him, whereas Hagar kind of just had to step away or couldn't handle it or whatever. So I don't know, there's all kinds of little nuances that I've been learning lately that I hadn't realized that I should like question, like why is it this way, or what does this mean, or what is God trying to teach me here. And even Abraham, again being someone after God's own heart, was somebody that was with his son Isaac even to the end, even the almost end. The same way that he wants us to be able to answer, like, here am I, like, I'm willing, I'm here, and God is that way for us too. So that probably is the end of my special thoughts.
Wow. No, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and look at that.
Making me want to go back and look at it more also.
I'm gonna
That's
send you
pretty
guys
interesting.
links.
Please do send
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
But now there's crazy questions.
Yes, just some short wrapping it up here.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of marvelness,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
If Abraham was going to be a Marvel character,
Oh wow.
Who would he be?
I don't know. Like, okay, so my Marvel game is probably lacking a little bit.
We'll allow you to mix DC.
But, well, I thought you were gonna ask me like movie questions, so I was like ready to be like, The Matrix. Yeah, like, you didn't know where it was going, but you had to like trust the story. And didn't know where it was going. But if I had to go Marvel on it, like maybe Chris Pratt from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wait,
because
so
he was like
Star-Lord?
Star-Lord.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is.
Because he like he didn't have, I don't know, he's just kind of wandering. Like he doesn't exactly know where he's going.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
I can see that.
I mean, it couldn't be anything Black Panther related because they have like their home base.
This
like,
is true.
You know, and Thor has his planet, and you know, I don't know. I mean, do you guys have an answer?
Not really.
No.
We just want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, we're just like
I'm pretty proud of my answer and research.
That's good. That was a creative description. That was creative. When I think about Abraham, obviously Abraham is synonymous with faith. You know, just being really. So, and then I guess in that movie,
Thor, because Thor has so much faith.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was going to say, but I did that.
See, you guys aren't gonna like me. I'm gonna go dark with it. I was gonna say Thanos.
Oh,
because he had to sacrifice his daughter, which was legitimately the only thing he loved.
The Soul Stone, when he's like
literally, I don't care about the universe. I want half of humanity to die. The only thing I love is this little girl. But I need this stone so much that I'm gonna kill her.
You can't top that. You can't top that. Because that's actually a really perfect description because he literally...
I mean, I know it makes him a bad guy,
but... An evil dream. Yes.
Wow.
He had faith in his plot to destroy, just like Abraham had faith in God's
Yeah,
plot to redeem.
in a different way. In a different way.
Yep.
Huh.
So yeah, he would have. So you think he would have tossed Isaac off of that cliff? Then
I mean, he was
So
about to
stone.
stab him. Like,
Yeah, you're right.
There's unfortunately.
God told
Yeah.
him to do it. Like,
Mhm.
this is what's got to happen.
Yeah.
You've almost ruined Abraham for me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So the moral of the story is think of Abraham like
No.
Chris Pratt and not like Thanos.
Or Thor. Or Thor.
Or Thor,
Thor
yeah.
has incessant faith.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
he does.
Gotcha.
He does.
Oh my
That's
goodness. Well, if Abraham was going to stop at a fast food restaurant, what do you think his favorite stop would be?
A Greek place for some lamb kebab.
Oh, okay.
Wow, she can say that automatically too.
Yeah, I wasn't
Like-
prepped. I was like,
Okay.
dad jokes ready for to go.
Okay.
Um,
Gotcha. Maybe get some
Wow.
shawarma in there.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
All right, I'm feeling it.
That's funny.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for our episode
Okay.
today.
Yeah.
Thank you
Good
guys
stuff.
for being here with us. And Sarah, thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here with us.
Absolutely.
We will definitely do this again.
Absolutely.
love
Devontae will be back not next week,
Mhm.
but the week after that.
That is correct.
All right,
Yes,
excellent.
I'll do that.
And we'll let you guys know when we are back. We're going to post it up. We'll probably put it in GroupMe, we'll put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram. We're going to tag to another podcast in the
Yes.
show notes here. We'll try to put down, we'll just put the general, like, Genesis, what is it, 7
Oh, that's a lot.
through, like, 12/20-ish.
You're gonna put all of that
I mean,
in.
We'll just put, like, these are the Abraham chapters
More like
for you guys to read through.
to
Maybe to 22.
Well,
Because
to 22?
20 22 is where it talks
Is where
about
he died.
Isaac.
Okay.
So I mean,
25 is where he dies.
yeah.
Alright. So we'll
Go
get
for
all
it.
of that captured up here in the show notes for you guys. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. See ya. We need to get like a fade out kind of thing.
I feel like I probably talked over my shoulder and I
Oh.
probably